I got this lot of Game Boy Colors and Game Boy Color games from Facebook Marketplace, and I've already cleaned the lot using isopropyl alcohol. So I went over the game cartridge slots as well as the game cartridge contacts to make sure they were all clean and tested them out. I've got quite a few good games here from this lot. I got some Pokemon Silvers. I actually got 2 of those, and then of course Duke Nukem here at the top. Now I've done some limited testing, and this purple Game Boy Color, this works. As far as I can tell, it works just fine. These other Game Boy Colors, however, they might have a problem, as well as these 2 games. They don't seem to work, Dracula and Mario Brothers here. Neither do these Game Boy Colors. I'll show you a bit later what I think is wrong with them, but for now, I'm going to start by looking at these games, seeing if we can get them to work, and I'll use the purple Game Boy Color to do that. We'll start by having a look at this Dracula Crazy Vampire Game Boy Color game. Never heard of this game before, so I thought I'd check it out, and I found this one review that says basically the game sucks, with a rating of 3 out of 10. So that's probably a reason why I haven't heard of it before. Nonetheless, I'll still try to repair it. So I'll show you what it does when I put it inside a Game Boy Color. This Game Boy Color does work fine. And as you can see, the Game Boy logo comes up, but nothing else happens. So on the plus side, it is a good sign that the Game Boy Color screen is coming up. It means it's reading something. It's detecting that there is a cartridge in there, but just not going any further. Now I'll put it back in, we can try it again, but as you can see, same kind of thing, just doesn't want to load up. For this, I'm using a 3.8mm security screwdriver bit to open just the one screw on the back of the cartridge here. Right, now that's off. I think we just slide it open like that. So slide a little bit and then you pull out. There we go. So the board itself is looking pretty nice visually. I can't see anything wrong. None of the chips look damaged at all. The connections look fine on this one, as well as the smaller one. I'd need to take a closer look. Now how it works, as I understand, very basic understanding, is this larger chip that you see here, that's the ROM. So that's the game, contains the game information. And then the smaller chip, a memory controller, something like that, that switches between sections of the ROM as you're playing the game. Let's take a quick look at the back here. Again, the traces look pretty nice. I can't see anything too obvious that might be a problem. I can see some marks here, nothing too big, but let's zoom in so I can show you a bit better. I wonder if that's enough to potentially destroy that trace so it's not making a connection. I doubt it, but let's give it a try. Let's pop it in this blue tack here just to try to hold the ball steady. The blue tack is quite squishy, squishier than I thought it would be. I think it's been quite hot. So yeah, it's a bit floppy, but still kind of works, still holds it in place. Now let's test some of these traces along the back, just to see if that mark actually means anything. Alright, so we're getting some signals along these traces. So I'm reasonably confident that that trace isn't a problem, but I've spotted something else. I wonder if you can see it. So if I skip rid of that, if I tilt the board a little bit, you might be able to see it a bit better. So have you spotted what I have seen? Now it could be insignificant, but on one of the contacts, I think it's the fourth one across, or the fifth one across, you'll see a mark here. It could be nothing. In fact, it probably is nothing. And I'll just zoom in a bit closer. But I wonder if that's preventing the cartridge from making proper contact with the Game Boy. So we can see that pin has proper continuity, and then let me go to the damaged pin here. Now you see it's quite intermittent. It's not as good as the first one. So it seems there is a bit of damage there. So then I proceed just to scrape that contact a little bit to improve that connection. Then I use a pencil eraser to improve those connections as well. Apparently it's meant to work very well. So I go over all the pins with that pencil eraser just to make sure the connections are as good as I can get them. Okay, now I've really cleaned those connections pretty well with that eraser. Let's give it a go on the Game Boy Color. No, still not working. Okay, there must be something else. So then what I do is, I won't take you through the whole process, but I go through pretty much most tracks on the board just to make sure there's continuity. Now this probably isn't the most efficient way of doing things, but to be honest, because it's such a small board, it only takes 5 minutes. So I thought, why not? Why not go through a lot of these connections? So what you can see me doing here is those little holes on the back, they're called vias. So I'm making sure that the contacts on the front of the cartridge are making their way through the back of the board through those vias. Then I'm also testing the pathways from each via to the next via to see if there's a connection there. And for all the tests I did, I couldn't find an issue. Okay, well I have a theory now. Everything seems fine, but I wonder if it's one of these chips. Maybe they're not making contact with the board as they're supposed to. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to get this plastic thing here. I'm going to push down on the chip as I start the game. Maybe that will help with the connection, and if it is a connection issue, start the game. Okay, so pushing down on the ROM chip doesn't seem to do anything. Let's try this controller chip here, the smaller one. So if I get that right. There we go. And no, okay. Well, still, it could be the chips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reflow the solder, starting with the ROM chip, see if that helps. Right, so I'm just going to add some flux here to the pins that help the solder flow and make it easier, prevent bridging of the contacts. So I'm just going to put the flux along these pins here, and I'll do it on the other side too. And now I'm just going to reflow these pins and make sure they're connected by adding a bit of solder and heat. Bridge those pins there. Yeah, I think I've added a bit too much solder, I think. Oh no. Yeah, I've added too much solder there, clearly. I might have to even wick that off. Okay, what I'll do is I'll move on to the rest of the pins, and I'll come back to these, see if we have any luck removing that excess solder just with the soldering iron. Otherwise, I'll use some wick to get that off. So I just want to make sure I'm applying a bit of heat here, just reheating the original solder, adding a bit of new solder to it, and of course making sure I'm not bridging the pins. So I need to go back to those first ones just to take off the excess solder, because they are definitely touching each other. So I'll just remove that there. And now onto the other side. Okay, so I've reflowed the solder on the ROM chip. Let's give it another go. the Game Boy screen. That's normal. Yes! It's working. All right, well, I won't celebrate yet. Let's get into the game. Make sure that's working too. So have a little play. So there we go. It seems like it probably is the ROM chip. Although it wasn't visible, you couldn't see it, wasn't connected. So the volume there. It obviously wasn't connected properly. And so just reflowing it has seemed to have done the trick. Oh, there we go. There's the sound. There we go. Now on to our next broken game. This one decidedly a lot better than our last one, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. And this one has a bit of a different issue. So let me show you. Game Boy screen comes up and it seems to start just fine. But you'll see the issue as I start playing. And there it is. So that will happen each time. I've played it a couple of times. During the first level, you get this garbled mess of a screen coming up. Sometimes it just freezes and there's no text on screen. But always in the first level, I can't get past it. So let's have a look. I'll use the same screw bit as I did for the last game to open it, of course. And we'll have a look inside. As I said, I've cleaned the contacts with isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, although there still might be further issues there. So, right. And you can already see, yeah, those contacts are not looking as good as the first game. Let me zoom in and show you. Particularly there's one in the middle. Just this one here looks particularly corroded and could be the issue. Okay, what I'll do then, I will give it another clean with isopropyl alcohol. I'll also give it the pencil eraser treatment, and we can give it another try, see if that helps any. What I do here is go over the contacts again with isopropyl alcohol. Then I get the pencil eraser, go over the contacts pretty thoroughly with this pencil eraser, again like I did for the first game, and then I go over it one final time with isopropyl alcohol. So now here's how the cartridge contacts look. I can see the difference. They are looking a lot shinier. And it's crashed. Now it might seem like a different error from last time, but this also happened too. So this is nothing new. It seems like the cartridge pin cleaning hasn't made a difference. I'm starting to suspect that it isn't the pins, but just to make sure, one final thing we'll do is try to remove this corrosion from the pins. And I'm going to use good old white vinegar here to do that, to help me do that. So like I said, I'm actually doubting whether it's the pins at this point, just because we're getting this error that's coming up at a certain stage within the first level. But just to make sure, I'm going to fill this empty packaging. I don't know what was in here originally, I can't remember, but I'm going to fill it with this white vinegar, and it has this really helpful groove in it that I think is going to be perfect for putting those cartridge pins in, soaking them in for a period of time. So it should fit. It's just a bit wobbly. I'll have to balance it a bit, but let's pop that in. Ah, beautiful. Works perfect. Like I said, it is a bit wobbly. I need to find something to stabilize that. What about this screwdriver here? Whoops, not good. There we go. So I left this for about 15 to 20 minutes, and once that was done, I cleaned off the white vinegar with isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip. I made sure I did the back too, because that was also covered in white vinegar. Okay, now here is how the pins look. I don't think I can get it better than that. I think they look really good, actually, a lot better than they did when we first had the cartridge. And you can see it's cleaned a lot of that corrosion off. In fact, I can't see any corrosion on that at all. So let's give this another test. On the first stage as before. Okay, it's pretty good. Hasn't crashed as soon as it did in my previous attempt. I'm getting further than I did in my previous attempt, which is a good sign. Oh, there we go. Crashed again. Yeah, I don't think it's the connection. I think the connections are pretty good. Now, I think we've got them to a pretty good state. I think it could be possibly the ROM chip again. So essentially, because the game was crashing at pretty much a similar point in the first stage each time, I don't think it was the cartridge contacts. If it was the cartridge contacts and it was somehow losing contact intermittently, you'd expect the crashing to be a bit more random. At least that was my logic. Because it was happening about the same time every time I played the game, I thought, it could be something to do with these chips and maybe a connection with the chip. So what I'm doing here is I'm reflowing the solder on the ROM chip, just like I did with the first game, adding the flux first and then taking to each pin with a soldering iron and a bit of fresh solder just to see if it is a connection issue with the ROM chip. And then of course, after I did that, I don't think I showed it with the first game, but I cleaned those pins off with isopropyl alcohol just to get rid of any excess flux, because flux is corrosive, so you want to get rid of it by cleaning it off with some IPA after you've done your work. Okay, so this is the first stage again. Around now is about where it would crash on me. So if I get through this part here, and this is the furthest I've ever got, then it's possible that it was the ROM chip again. So, oh, here we go. This looks like the end of the level. Yeah, I have not got this far before. Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's done it. I think it was, again, a ROM chip reflow job that has fixed the problem. Now, I'll play on a little bit more just to make sure I go into the next stage. But how strange is that? You know, two different games, both the same kind of issue with that ROM chip. It must be quite a common issue, I'd imagine. I mean, there is such a small amount of contact being made from those chips on the main board. I do get how over time those connections break. So it kind of makes sense. And I wonder how many Game Boy Color games have suffered a similar fate and just been discarded as broken when all they needed was a quick solder job just to bring them back to life. Now we'll check out the Game Boy Colors, starting with this one. Now the ad did describe the Game Boy Colors as having some issues, so it wasn't like it's a deceptive Facebook ad. I'm going to try Mario Deluxe here, and I'll show you what happens with this one. It's not turning on now. Wiggle the batteries a bit. Yep. There we go, just some loose contact. So it does turn on, and it shows this Game Boy screen. It's a bit garbled, the Nintendo. Below that, nothing else. So let's put the cartridge in again, just to show you that it's not a once-off problem. This happens actually repeatedly. Again, same kind of thing. And we know that game works, of course, because we just repaired it. So, that's that Game Boy. Then I set about opening up the Game Boy Color. These things are a real pleasure to open up, real simple to do. The screws for the case are a tri-wing Y25 screw bit. So there's about 6 of them there, I think. And then when you get onto the main board, they're just plain Phillips screws. I used a PH1 screw bit to undo those. And there are only 3 of them there. Now here we have, it's still connected to the screen. We have to take this ribbon cable out. There's the 2 black tabs here, I'll just push up on. That will release the cable, it should. And I think from there, it's pretty easy just to slide it off. Taking the Game Boy Color apart is actually really simple. Yeah, just like that. So nice to actually work on something that's easy to take apart. Right away, I can see a potential issue. Let me zoom in and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So these pins along here, they've got this yellow color to them, and it looks like it's been worked on before. Someone has definitely worked on this board before. I can't imagine it looked like this coming out of factory. I don't know what that brown stuff is. Maybe it's flux, something else. But yeah, it looks like it's been worked on before. So see here, this is the other Game Boy Color I have, the transparent one, and you can see there's none of that brown stuff there. Just to confirm that there isn't something that should be there, and that's why I think someone's been messing around with this before I've opened it. Okay, well, it's not a great sign. It means that it could be a more complicated problem than I expect. So those soldered pins, they connect to the cartridge slot pins on the other side of the board. So what I'm doing here is just a continuity check between those pins and the pins on the cartridge reader on the other side, making sure there's a connection there and nothing funny going on. So I think there might be something going on here. This solder joint actually has continuity with 2 cartridge pins. So each solder joint should correspond to just one, but there's one here that corresponds to 2 of them. And that is strange. I wonder if there's some kind of short going on or something else that's causing that to happen. So what number is that? So that's pin or solder joint A4. And I can see there's this tiny thread there. A tiny thread. I'll see if I can get it out. No. So taking a closer look, so it's solder joint A4 that I'm looking at. A4 and A5. Now if you take a close look here, you can see the tiniest of threads between the two. I don't know what that is, but something seems to be bridging the 2 joints. I don't think it's solder. It's some kind of thread that's bridging the 2. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it off with my fingers. Just want to check. What I'll do is I want to continuity check them between those 2 pins just to make sure, those 2 joints, solder joints, just to make sure that that is the case. So look at this, A4, A5, continuity. Check the other pins, nothing. Go back to A4, A5, continuity. I'm pretty sure that shouldn't be there, and I'd imagine it is that thread that's possibly causing them to short. Okay, wouldn't that be amazing if that was the problem? Just really simple fix. So let me try and cut that thread. Let's try this flathead screwdriver there. Yeah, I think that's done it. I felt something give. I can't see it anymore. Well, whenever check, just do a continuity check just to make sure. There we go. So, okay, let's put it back together, try it again, test it, just to see if that was the problem. There we go. Okay, it's working just fine. I cannot believe that it was something so simple like that. As to what happened, I have no idea. Obviously, someone was having problems with it. They've opened it up, soldered those pins, and because of that short between those 2, it was very hard to see. So maybe they couldn't see it and they've given up. and just left it as it is. I have no idea, but whatever the case, that was a real simple, straightforward fix. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm just swapping the board from this transparent Game Boy Color over with the purple Game Boy Color. Because of that brown stuff, it doesn't look particularly nice, and because the Game Boy is transparent, you can kind of see it. So if I put it in the purple Game Boy Color, you won't be able to see that brown stuff. It doesn't really matter. And of course, the board in the purple Game Boy Color not only works, but it also looks nicer. So if I swap the two, it's going to make that transparent Game Boy look just that little bit better. So onto my final Game Boy. If you remember, this one was working, but it's just that one of the buttons weren't working. So going straight behind the board here. So just disconnecting that screen again. Flipping the board and looking at the rubber membranes and the contact on the surface of the board, and already you can see on that A button there's a lot of black gunk there. That's clearly stopping it from registering a button press. So a little bit of IPA, isopropyl alcohol, will clean that up good and proper. I'm going to clean these membranes here because they look pretty rotten too. Just having a closer look, this membrane, it felt very spongy as well when pressing. Let's have a look inside. If I push it in, there we go. Yeah, it's broken. It's pretty much, it's rotten. I need to replace this whole thing, I think. But that's okay. I have some spare membranes. These are aftermarket Game Boy Color parts. I got these from AliExpress. And I'll just swap these new ones with the old ones, get rid of the old ones completely. Now we have the new button membranes installed. Let's give it one final test. And also, I did buy a new battery cover from AliExpress. So this is a third-party battery cover for this Game Boy, just to finish it off, complete the repair. Okay, seems like the buttons are working. I'll just play a bit more to see if running and jumping works. So running's working, jumping, yeah, that's fine. So there we are. Well, 2 Game Boy Colors and 2 Game Boy Color games successfully repaired. I've also put battery covers on each of them. These are third-party battery covers from AliExpress, just to complete the overall repair. Some interesting issues there, nothing overly complex, but I'm glad I was able to fix everything in that lot. That's it for this video. If you have enjoyed it, remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you have enjoyed it, you might also consider subscribing. Thank you for watching as always, and I hope to catch you in the next one.